So if you're familiar with cheesy movies from the 1970s, you might have heard of a little movie called The Legend of Boggy Creek.
I know I have.
Now, that's supposed to be a documentary about encounters with a hairy hominid down in Arkansas. There's a little more to the story than you get to see there, though.
Let's pursue it.
From a child born into this world, we are taught what to believe. Closed-minded we become, fearful to be deceived. Still we desire to know what lies beyond that locked door. The art of the storyteller, conjuring tales of legend and lore. History hidden, lost knowledge, things forgotten and the unknown. These are the things that direct us and will set the tone. Welcome, friends, to another episode of Nightmares on the Lost Highway.
So, my love of this particular topic, I mean, Bigfoot figures in pretty prominently. I don't know about you. You know, we talk about UFOs and aliens and all kinds of other things.
All the good stuff.
But I can't tell you how many books I've read on Bigfoot growing up as a kid.
Well, Bill, don't take this wrong. You kind of look like a Bigfoot.
Well, I mean, I do have big feet and I don't shave. So, a lot of hair going on. That was unexpected.
Curveball.
But, so back in the 70s, there was a spate, what was the word? The spate, I think, is the right word. I might be wrong.
Spade?
Spate. With a T.
I am unsure of what you're talking about.
Group of sightings.
I am unfamiliar
Let's just say
with
group
this
of
term.
sightings. We'll cut that part out.
Okay. You lost me on that one.
Back in the 70s, there was a batch of sightings near Fouke, Arkansas, in Miller County. The initial sightings were focused around the Jonesville/Boggy Creek area, with later sightings ranging as far as several hundred miles from the original location. So to call the Fouke Monster,
A little misleading.
it seems like they just slapped that name on any creature that appears within 100 miles of there. One detail I thought would be interesting, at least on a personal level for you and I, was the Fouke Monster was named by reporter Jim Powell.
Jim Powell.
Which, Jim Powell used to be Eric and I's boss once upon a time.
Yes.
I'm sure it's a different Jim Powell. But he worked for the Texarkana Gazette and the Texarkana Daily News, and he coined the name Fouke Monster.
And it's kind of a generic name. I mean, obviously, we're in Laclede County, so I guess if we had a similar one, it would be the Laclede Monster. You know,
or they'd call it the Lebanon Monster, even if you saw it in Columbia.
Yeah.
Something like that.
A little vague, and I don't know.
Now, as far as the appearance of this great beast goes, I mean, when you think of Bigfoot, you think of hairy hominids. They all kind of look very similar. He's a large, hairy hominid covered in long, dark hair, estimated to be 7 feet tall, between 250 and 300 pounds. The chest is reported to be 3 feet wide, which makes him a pretty big boy.
Barrel-chested.
Now, later reports will increase the height up to 10 feet tall and the weight up to 800 pounds. Of course, as time goes by, apparently he grows.
He's ate very well.
Has a terrible odor, which they can describe as the combination of skunk and wet dog.
Very squashish.
Gross. But again, the smell, you know, that seems to be part and parcel. In the stories of Momo, the Missouri Monster, they describe a smell. Of course, in Florida, you have the skunk ape, and that is literally named for the smell.
And a lot of times they say they smell it before they ever see it. That actually causes them to pause and investigate a little further. Now,
the beast has bright red eyes described as roughly the size of silver dollars and is said to leave a variety of track and claw marks. One set of footprints measured 17 inches long, 7 inches wide, and quite a few others showed only 3 toes. 3 toes seems to be fairly common for this particular monster.
I also came across that in my research. One thing a little bit different from your research is I found a portion of the track seemed to be on the smaller scale. Now, you mentioned up to 17-inch. Some of the research that I had done, that was one of the scientists and investigators' thoughts was this seems to be a little bit smaller version of the large Sasquatch Bigfoot track. So that's interesting that it maybe has grown into that, possibly a younger version in the earlier years.
Yeah, the Fouke monster kind of seems to have a variety of descriptors. I don't think there's any one for sure, other than it being a hairy humanoid creature. I don't think there's anything. I don't think they pin it down to a particular appearance.
Well, one thing we were talking about as we were getting the setup, and our Alex Tudor was helping us with our sound equipment here. We were talking now. You may or may not have heard of the legend of Boggy Creek, but now this creature has a total of 5 films made about it. We were talking about this beforehand.
I have the names of those here. We could go through those if you want.
Sure, touch on that. You'd mentioned the legend of Boggy Creek.
Of course, you have 1972's The Legend of Boggy Creek.
The very first one.
A semi-factual documentary-style movie. Now, I personally saw that when I was a much younger child. My mom encouraged me to watch it, knowing that I was into the Bigfoot phenomenon. Even as a kid, I don't remember being scared of it. I don't remember being...
Yeah, it's a product of its time. It obviously was a B-rated movie before probably that label was used a lot.
Product of its time and its budget, I would say. I think it was made for, a handful of dollars, basically.
Right. It would, in today's society, you might consider it like a school or college-made movie.
The second movie is 1977's Return to Boggy Creek. This one is entirely fictional, based on the story of 3 children getting lost in the swamp and eventually being rescued by the Fouke monster.
Interesting pitch.
Which, now, I've seen that one too. I remember seeing it a couple times growing up. It's again, you say a product of its time. It's
right.
It's not high cinema, but it's watchable, I think.
It's out
there. At least it was when I was a kid. We then jump forward a few years. We have 1985's Boggy Creek 2, and The Legend Continues. It is intended to be a sequel to the 1972 movie, where a group of students and their professor go to Fouke to investigate the monster. Interesting detail, the professor is played by Charles B. Pierce, who was the director of the first movie.
Nice.
So he makes his return to the Boggy Creek lore. You have 2010's Boggy Creek, The Legend is True, which is an unrelated fictional story set in Texas. I mean, they just keep slapping that name on.
Which, again, we were talking now, Fouke, Arkansas, and I'm from right here in Missouri. I thought it was more central Arkansas area, and it's not at all. It's in the Texarkana, extreme southwestern region, close to Louisiana, close to Texas.
Yeah, it's pretty close to the state line there.
So, yeah, interesting.
And then finally, you have 2011's The Legacy of Boggy Creek, a docudrama set after the original events. So even only one of these movies purports to actually tell what happened at Boggy Creek back in the 70s.
But definitely someone is trying to keep the legend alive. I mean, obviously let's just face it, a little-known monster, to have 5 films made about it in a period from 1972 to 2011.
Yeah.
There's some effort there. I mean, now, I don't know if the sightings have driven that or if it's just a few diehards, like you said, the one producer, I believe, in the first film was in the second film. I don't know if it's just a group of diehards that are just, hey, we want to be known for something, we're going to be known for this. Or if maybe your research has shown something, maybe it just keeps coming up.
Well, if you really look into when there's sightings, and mind you, not very many of them get a lot of detail, but there are sightings, they say, maybe a couple per year of what they call the Fouke monster. And I'm going to assume, judging by, location, that he does roam around a little bit. He's not just local to that area. But every year they have sightings. Even back in some of my research here, I would say in some years there'd be as many as 40 sightings and then fail to detail any of those sightings.
See, that I also come across a lot of that there was a lot of stories, a lot of sightings. Most are pretty vague. Unfortunately, I didn't come across what I would call physical evidence of any like cast tracks or blood samples or fur samples.
And that seems to be the thing with the Fouke monster. Almost all evidence is anecdotal. It's somebody who saw something. Hey, I saw it walking across the street. Hey, I saw it in the stream. Hey,
I know this guy who saw this, secondhand.
There's no fur. There's no photographs. There's no pictures of footprints. There's no casts of footprints. Almost all that we have is just based on somebody seeing it.
Now, I don't know if it was just me. Did you notice anything about the encounters that seemed a little off to you, but a lot of them seemed very similar?
Well, a lot of them just seem to describe sighting the creature at a distance. Crossing the road seems to be a common theme.
I found, at least in my research, that, and I'm going to say heavily, over 50%, I'm going to say closer to 60% of the sightings seem to be by women, almost like it was targeting women, for lack of a better term,
Well,
stalking them, if you will.
I guess I didn't look quite as much into who saw the creature.
I kept coming across, and it would be a group of girls at a sleepover party. It would be a couple wives who their husbands was working night shift. And that common thread seemed to come through, not 100%, but again, more often than not, it almost seemed like it was stalking women or children, as the case could be. Going back many, many years to the early 70s, and the first film actually talks about it, the Fouke monster, the legend of Boggy Creek, whatever you want to call him or her, took place really heavily into the 60s and 70s, seemed to be very strong for about 50 years. And then there was an incident with a small boy who had some hunting dogs, and he went out he thought that the dogs were chasing a deer possibly. So he grabbed his gun, and again, maybe not in today's society, that might not be accepted, but this young boy was probably 13-ish, unsupervised. But again, we're in a very rural area, a lot of wildlife, and
that wouldn't be unheard of.
Yeah, this was pretty normal for the time frame. But he grabbed his guns, started chasing his dogs, who he thought was chasing a deer. Before he caught up with them, he heard the dogs yelping and kind of screaming, and he finally got up there trying to figure out what was going on. He thought possibly it was a bear or a mountain lion. He did see some of the dogs that had been attacked by something. Now, they were running the opposite direction at this point. But he came face to face with the Fouke monster, and in the movie it depicts it quite well. The kid is just absolutely panicked. The creature turns and looks at him, and he fires 2 shots just directly right at him. The monster lets out these bellowing screams. Obviously, he has been hit. He has been injured. The boy trips over his own feet, drops the gun, and literally just runs as fast as he can back to go get help at the house. That ensued in probably one of the biggest manhunt, wouldn't be the best word for it, but a creature hunt. And the entire town came out. They brought in some of the best, they said, tracking dogs in the Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas area. And they went out like the next day and started trying to find out what caused this. It did not seem to be a point that this was hard to believe. The group was, something's been going on here for many years. Let's put a stop to it. And the story goes on that a lot of the best hunting dogs in the region, whenever they would come across a scent, they would whimper and whine and pull away. They did not want to pursue whatever this was. They did mention they found like 2-inch sapling trees that were broken, like where the creature was trying to get away. They found pools of blood where the creature had stopped. Grass had been kind of laid out flat where he had possibly stopped and rest. But again, no blood samples, no fur samples, no castings of tracks was made. Hundreds of people took to the woods for this hunt. A lot of them pulled back out when the dogs would not hunt. And again, you got to keep in mind, this is a very swampy, boggy, wooded area, very thick, very hard to get through. But that same evening, they said a group of dedicated hunters and dogs picked up the scent. They did spot it. They did find more blood trails. They fired shots and believed they ran it out of the area. And after that, there was a period of about 8 years where sightings kind of disappeared.
Now, what would be the time frame on this particular?
Well, the film was in 1972, so it didn't actually put a time on it, but I would have gathered it would have been like 1965-ish, maybe very late 1960s.
Okay, yeah. I think I have a very truncated version of that in my notes here.
But where I was kind of going with the story was, up until then, it seemed like the creature was actually very laid back and docile. There wasn't really any attacks or anything until they hunted it, shot it, injured it, ran it off. And then when it does come back for encounters, it does kind of seem to take on a little bit more of an aggressive attitude, which I guess could be, obviously explained.
Yeah, that's definitely something I noticed, is that this seems to be more aggressive than your typical Bigfoot story. He does seem to attack dogs, and really one of the most best documented ones is him attacking the Ford house.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have here that the first reported sightings started back as possibly as far as 1908. And then I believe their sightings kind of continue with batches of sightings around 1953, 55, possibly. And then they claim that there's an ape-like creature roaming the area back in 1964, which I think kind of coincides with your story of the young boy. And the locals themselves say it goes back as far as 1946. So you have a lot of different years here thrown around as far as when the beast is there, when it's not. One of my favorite pre-1971 stories, in December of 1969, a family driving on Highway 71 saw what they thought was a man in a fur coat walking down the road, heading the opposite direction. It's December. It's close to Christmas time. They feel they should be charitable. They want to stop and pick up this guy. Obviously, he's freezing.
Oh my
walking
gosh.
down the road. So they start to pull over, and as they get closer, it raises a thick, hairy, muscular arm to shield its eyes from the headlights. And it's that point in time they realize this is no man. This is a beast covered in thick, shaggy fur.
I'm sorry. I'm envisioning the Slim Jim commercial messing with Sasquatch here at this point in time.
Hey, buddy, you want to ride?
Hey.
He's caked in mud from his knees down, and obviously when they realize that they're not stopping, when they're not going to be good Samaritans to pick this guy up, they just kind of hit the gas and take off for home.
Interesting.
Now, in 1971 seems to be the main sighting, if you will, that kind of gets all this started. And so on the night of May 2nd, Bobby and Elizabeth Ford have probably what is arguably the most well-documented, the most commonly accepted encounter with the Fouke monster. They had heard something moving outside late at night for several months prior to what they would consider their encounter. So, not being locals of the area, they had just recently moved in. They didn't really know what was going on. They didn't know what kind of animals they had in the area.
And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, this is two families that had come together to kind of save money. I believe the husbands had taken a job at a local ranch, and so the husbands were away working nights, so the wives and the kids would be together.
It's possible that is their situation. The night in question, I believe the husband and his friends were out hunting, is what I have documented.
Yes. I think we're on the same families.
So yeah, but most versions of it just account it to the Fords. So their living situation may have been something different. Now, other witnesses of that night include Bobby's brother and what they called his hunting companions. So they must have been out hunting that night. But originally, the men spotted the creature around back of the house.
Mm-hmm.
They took a shot at it, and they said they saw it fall. And then they started back towards the creature. They wanted to, obviously want to see what they'd killed. They didn't know what it was.
Wanted to pursue it.
When Bobby heard a woman scream from the house, and so he takes off running. Now, Elizabeth Ford was asleep on the couch while everybody was out hunting that night when a large arm reached through the window to grab her, tried to snatch her off the couch. She saw the creature's large red eyes through the window and obviously let out a scream, which got Bobby's attention. Bobby came back and was attacked by the creature. At one point in time, it grabbed him even, and in his own words, he managed to get away and ran home so fast that he just ran straight through the front screen door. Didn't even bother to open it to get away from this beast. The men took shots at the creature at that point in time. They claim that they never found blood. They believe they'd hit it, but they didn't seem to find any traces of blood. And there was an extensive search that failed to turn up any more details of the creature. They said it moved very fast. They found the traditional three-toed footprints near the house. They found scratch marks on the porch and damage to the window in the house siding near where it would have reached through the window. The sheriff's department came and investigated the area. I believe Bobby went to the hospital, and it is documented he did have scratches.
Right.
But the old boy did run straight through a screen door, so...
Sure. I had found in that encounter that when the sheriff actually arrived, Bobby was, I guess in shock would be the best way to put it. He was not able to really carry on at least conversations, and the sheriff actually gave them a police escort to the ER in Texarkana. And yes, he did have some damage, and he said, or the best they could tell was he was mauled, was the word that was used, picked up, possibly even thrown by this creature. So, I mean, yes, it was taken very serious. The police come out, did a full-blown report. They looked around.
Yeah, it says the police did come out and investigate the area. They found the tracks and the scratches. But again, it kind of goes back to that. There's no physical evidence. They didn't take any pictures. They didn't collect samples of anything.
Yeah, and you would think by this time frame, I mean, it's not that hard to have a camera. You got news reporters and stuff that are around there. Tracks have been cast of Sasquatch and Bigfoot for, since the late 60s for sure. I don't know why we keep missing that very important key. I mean, that's evidence that, you would want to get that.
Well, not too long after that, Jim Powell, which we referenced earlier, is working for the Texarkana newspapers, came out to interview the Fords and I don't know the name of the other family. It was theirs.
Turners, I believe.
The Fords
is what my
and the
research.
Turners. When he showed up, they were in the process of packing up house. They got out of Dodge.
They had enough after that incident.
They didn't want any more to do with it, and I don't blame them. That'd be a rough night to get through.
And this is exactly, your story was the same as the one I was thinking about. Yeah, there was two families, the Fords and the Turners, who had moved newly to the area. From what I showed, the two husbands, I think, worked at a nearby ranch, and they were kind of night shift. So, one, they had decided because they were moving to a new area, the families were going to live together, save some money, and that way the wives, and they had children. Both families did have children, so they could kind of accompany each other while the husbands were away. But the girls, this is kind of going back to what I was saying before, it almost seemed to kind of target women. The girls had several sightings while the husbands were away at work that led up to this ordeal. Everything from they spotted it, they heard some noise outside, would open the window, they would find it, out there just kind of like going through the trash, nosing around. But it always seemed to kind of keep a distance until like the third or fourth sighting, and then they said it would actually, like, they felt it was like a cow rubbing up against the mobile home trailer enough that it would move it. I mean, you could feel it, you could hear it. And the girls kept telling their husbands, and the landlord, which I believe was the rancher the husbands actually worked for, he was called several times. He came down with a gun thinking that, there was somebody that was just trying to mess with them, possibly break in. He could never find anything. No signs, no mention of tracks. But this had kind of escalated up to this event when the guys were home, and they had, I want to say it was a brother-in-law and some friends that came over for a hunting trip, and that's when this whole ordeal happened. So, and this 1971 encounter is probably the most well documented out of all of them. There for a little while in the 70s, you do have other reports. Later, May 23rd, 3 people, D.C. Woods Jr., Wilma Woods, and a Mrs. R.H. Sedgas, reportedly see an ape-like creature crossing U.S. Highway 71 again. Here we go again.
And that's about it. You have more sightings over the following months from locals and tourists alike. Additional footprints found in a nearby soybean field belonging to Scott Keith, a local, showed the 3-toed footprints again. And then in the fall later that year, near Fouke, a local family reportedly heard howls from the woods and saw a creature walking in their woods. But that's about it. I mean, they say that there's reported sightings almost every year, a couple of times a year. Like you said, one of those, it said there were like 40-something sightings in one particular year, but there's not a lot of detail on those sightings.
Just snapshots.
It's like, hey, I saw it.
Yeah, I say snapshots. I wish we would have had a snapshot of a picture.
Now, here's a couple of little interesting tidbits about that time frame. Right after the sightings, local Little Rock radio station KAAY, and I'm going to say, like, weirdly specific, posted a $1,090 bounty on the creature. There were several attempts to track the creature with dogs, which, they didn't have a lot of luck with that. When local hunters got involved, the Miller County Sheriff issued a temporary no-guns policy, which for that part of the world,
that's a big thing.
Strict.
That's a big thing.
In 1971, 3 people were fined $59 each for, quote, filing a fraudulent monster report.
Ooch. Getting serious now.
So by the time you get to 1973... 1974, interest in the creature kind of goes away. In 1978, you get some more tracks reported by some brothers near Russellville. There's sightings near Center Ridge, Arkansas. On June 26th, there's a sighting reported near Crossett, Arkansas. In that time frame, the creature is blamed for missing livestock and attack on dogs. Again, we talked about it seems like an aggressive thing.
I had one sighting that I'd come across. Again, it was pretty vague and short, but there was a hunter who raised prize hunting dogs. And one night he heard something attacking his dogs outside. So he was awakened, grabbed his gun, ran out with a flashlight. And he found, this is kind of graphic, but found the dog skinned alive, in his words. And it was so fresh that the body was still like flinching and everything. And it was like thrown over, I guess you would say, the dog pen. It was like still kind of hanging on the side, like he had interrupted something. Definitely, it went from a docile, laid-back creature to very aggressive.
Well, again, if it's the same creature and you're taking pot shots at it from time to time,
I guess maybe
they pushed it.
Yeah,
too
maybe
far.
pushed it a little bit.
It's like Rambo,
right? I did have another one I thought here was worth mentioning. This took place on the property of a gentleman by the name of Howard Walhaven. He was an avid hunter, fisherman, and had he been at home, he swore things would have went a little differently. But he was out of town on work, so his teenage daughter had invited a couple girlfriends over for a sleepover, and this would have been in the early 70s time frame. The girls were having their normal sleepover, and of course you're out in the middle of nowhere, and you start telling ghost stories or hearing knocks and noise, and they started getting kind of spooked and scared. So the girls, they go and they think something's outside, and sure enough, they see a hairy, human-like creature that is observing them from a distance, and kind of Sasquatch style, he is picking up rocks and throwing against the house.
That seems to be a Sasquatch thing to do.
Yeah, so that obviously got their attention. The one girl saw it, hollered for the other girls to come. They didn't see it at first. However, by giving it attention, it seemed to come closer. It was out on the front lawn and started picking up flower pots and breaking them, throwing stuff like the flower pots, pulling up, like rooting up flowers and trees, small twigs, and throwing them.
So he's just a vandal at this point.
Yeah, he's just vandalizing the heck out of the place. The girl's absolutely scared to death. They hunker down. They make it through the night. Apparently there's no phone or anything for them to contact anyone, so they have to wait for Howard Walhaven to come back home. And when daylight comes, sure enough, vandalized. I mean, there's flower pots broken, trees and stuff bent over, branches broke off, and that was kind of it.
Well, really, there's not a lot of sightings even after the 1970s. Again, you get sporadic reports. In 1991, the creature was seen jumping from a bridge, which when I read that, I really hoped it wouldn't be the last sighting. And it wasn't. 1997, it's the year that I've referred to a couple times, 40 reported sightings. And yet if you look up 1997 Fouke monster sightings, you find no detail about any of them. And then in 1998, the creature was sighted in a dry creek bed 5 miles south of Fouke. And that's sort of the last official, documented sighting. Now, if there is a website dedicated just to the Fouke monster, and again, the details aren't quite... no sighting is as detailed as the 1971 sighting by the Fords. Now they on their website have sightings, from the 1950s or so, all the way up through last year, this year. So they accept submissions. So are these legit? Are these people looking to make a name for themselves?
Right.
I don't know. But they say that, every couple of years, there's a sighting of the Fouke monster somewhere in that area.
Well, I know in the movie, The Legend of Boggy Creek, there's a kind of for lack of a better term, a hermit that lives about 3 miles down the river. And I cannot remember his name. I think they do give it in the movie. But while they're there filming the movie, they go out to him and they think, well, this guy, he's living off the grid, basically. Let's see what he has to say about it. He scoffed and laughed about it. He said, I've lived out here in the swamps and the boggy area for, I think he said 20 plus years. He just kind of lives out there by himself. He said he has never heard anything. He has never saw anything. He has no reason to believe this creature even exists remotely. So I think they were hoping for a little bit slightly different story.
So that means he's the creature, right? Using Scooby-Doo rules?
Yeah, Scooby-Doo rules. But
no, I think the official take on this one is that it's an absolute hoax.
They've sure tried. They've done their best to keep it alive in the 70s, the mention that you made where they found some new tracks. It seems to rebirth it every now and then and kind of rekindles the fire, so to speak. But, I mean, they've called scientists in, scholars and everything, and they've speculated, got national attention, but they've speculated, is it a orangutan? Is it a gorilla? You know, trying to put some logic to it. But the thing that really seems to throw everybody off is the three toes, which seems to be very consistent with the sightings.
A lot of scientists would argue that that is not a feature you're going to find in any kind of humanoid or primate.
Right. Gorillas, orangutans, apes, monkeys, none of them have three toes.
Now, I guess one could argue that maybe it's some sort of birth defect, maybe.
But would you have three toes on both feet? You know, possibly. I don't know.
It's
a stretch. It's a stretch. I mean, obviously, like I said, a creature that's got 5 films dedicated to it, a website with sightings all the way up to present day.
You know, it's a very famous monster.
They've done their best to keep it alive. One would have to ask, you know, how old would this creature have to be at this point? Is there more than one?
Well, I think the common argument with anything related to Sasquatch, Bigfoot type phenomenon, there has to be a breeding population for these creatures to exist.
To continue to exist.
You can't just have immortal Sasquatch roaming the woods.
He's 2,000 years old, yeah. So, I don't know, I'm on the fence. As a young teenager, I remember watching the film, and I will say I watched it again before the podcast, just to kind of refresh, because it had probably been 20 years since I'd watched it.
I had tried to watch it not that many years ago with my kids, and
it's a little rough.
We got 5 minutes into it, maybe.
It's a little rough. You've got to want to watch the content pretty bad. It's a product of its time.
When we took our vacation and we went down to Arkansas not that long ago, it was one of my thoughts was even to go to Fouke. I mean, that's how much this creature is part of the lore that I thought I was relatively close. Turns out where I was at was still a couple hours away.
We thought the same thing, yeah.
And I didn't feel like going that far out of my way, but if I'd been closer, I definitely would have gone to that town just to say I'd been there.
Now, I did find some references, I don't know if you did, that at least at one time there was kind of a little museum, if you will, that was set up there. I don't know if that's still...
Well, I know they have a yearly Fouke Monster Festival.
Okay.
And it's typically held in Fouke. Now, it has moved. I think it was in Texarkana one year, but they have this festival, and it's almost like let's say a cryptid convention. They get people that are supposedly experts on Bigfoot lore and the like, and they make their presentations and they talk. So I know obviously Fouke no one's going to blame them if they cash in on the little bit of celebrity that their town has.
And I think that small town has a population of just under 1,000. I mean, 900 and something. So it's a very small rural community.
The town where they saw Mothman has the big Mothman statue and a Mothman festival.
Yeah.
When you have some sort of claim to fame like this, no one's going to fault you for cashing in on it.
Yeah, take it and run with it. So. All right, well, that's really about all I could come up with this on the creature. It is an interesting one, and like I said, if nothing else, I kind of imagine the Slim Jim commercial messing with Sasquatch, but I mean, this guy has got a lot of fame with movies. Maybe he's got some big glasses with sequins on the side, Macho Man Randy Savage-ish, strolling down the red carpet. So maybe there'll be a newer film with hopefully some newer evidence. I would love to see some foot castings, some fur samples, because I'm kind of like Mulder. I want to believe.
Well, I want to believe.
It's hard when you don't really have any physical evidence.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's all anecdotal. It's all I saw, this happened, that happened. But there's no photographs. There's no plaster cast of footprints or anything.
Yeah.
You would think that would be pretty common. The Bigfoot phenomenon was well on its way, when they had the 71 encounter. So,
well, we'll let you guys be the deciding factor. We just want to bring you these stories. And this is just another example of what you will find on Nightmares on the Lost Highway. Thanks for listening. I would like to thank Alex Tudor, who has been helping us a lot with our endeavors on this podcast.
You could call him our producer at this point, I think.
Our producer, electronic recording technician. He's the one that's setting up all the mics and the hardware in the background. And then Bill Weirs is going through, taking his time to try to clean and edit this up and give us the best possible version that we can present to you folks. Want to thank everybody involved with that.